Hello, welcome to our new recording space. All right, I sat here for like maybe a good 10 minutes, like figuring out whether or not I was even going to press go live on this video. So, for the people that received a link and are joining us in the early live stream of what will later be posted, hi. I'm Huldah, and you are watching the Royal Roots YouTube channel. Today, we are going to look at a couple of things. I've had so many things on my mind probably over the last like 6 or 7 months as far as study is concerned. And not until recently did they all kind of come together. So I'm really excited to share what we're going to talk about today, which is going to be a launching pad toward a next series of teachings until the Most High gives us another direction. So I'm super excited to kind of bring you up to speed of what we do on this channel. If this is your first live stream or first video on this channel, we in the past were covering Hebrew word studies, culture and context of ancient agrarian and Near East peoples to allow us to dive into what it looked like to live in community and in sisterhood and in harmony with everything around us. So now, moving forward, not much of that has changed. You'll be introduced to some new people on this channel, so that'll be really fun. But as far as my function, form, and place in this space, I am going to be what I like to call your resident cultivator. So we will obviously still continue with our husbandry videos as they pertain to the animals and our gardening videos as, you know, we grow and cultivate things here. But my place in this space will be your mental cultivator, if you will. And everyone who will share here will also take on a very similar role in stimulating thought and growth, both spiritual and in your physical and everyday lives. So super excited about that. So today is kind of an intro to what we will be diving into, and it's the basis or the groundwork, no pun intended, for how we'll be moving forward. All right, so the title of what we're going to deal with today is Cultivating Consciousness. Now, two big words with a lot of meaning, but we're going to break it down and we're going to deal with it on a psychological level, on a spiritual level, and on an everyday, day-to-day level. And we're going to really figure out what it means to walk and live in this life in a conscious manner. So in a world, especially our world that we live in, everything is so digital. Everything is automated and very, very technical. And it can add a bit of sterile vibe to how we move throughout life. We do things because we're supposed to, or because that's how they're aligned. We're not supposed to question. And that spans into so many different directions. And the area where it can be the most crippling is on the spiritual journey, where everybody is pretending like they have it all figured out. Over the past few months, that has been something that has been running through my mind, or that I've been ruminating on, is that we carry thought with such conviction, which really stagnates the ability to grow past thoughts that we had when we're confronted with truth. We talk about cognitive dissonance as it pertains to people in other religious groups or in other thought processes, but we don't ever talk about cognitive dissonance as it pertains to those who consider themselves conscious or woke. But there is still a lot of cognitive dissonance, and it takes sometimes the outside action or inward journeying for us to really come to grips with the fact that we do have cognitive dissonance. And in a lot of ways, we carry stagnancy that is boxed in by fear of what may be on the other side of what we held to be true. So when we're talking about cultivating consciousness, it's not that we're trying to unravel the truth that we know and that we've experienced, but it's the ability to go into that truth and to cultivate and produce fruit with that truth. A lot of people have a lot of knowledge and a lot of information and maybe even a lot of lived experience, but the fruit that's being born from that experience is subpar to the standard that the Most High has, not only for their lives, but for the people who are grabbing fruit from their tree or from their source. And so we have to be really careful in the process of spiritual journeying that we don't get so convicted about our space and how that journey looks to us that we are pushed outside of the ability to learn. About, I would say it's been maybe a few years, I did a video called So Now What? And it was at the very beginning of a spiritual transition for myself. I was transitioning from the very simplistic view of the Christian religion and into a more dedicated view into my biblical studies and spiritual journey toward understanding who I was through identity and understanding who the Most High was and his place in my life as far as it concerned day-to-day living, celebrations, culture, context. So the video was made from a place of beginnings. And I was a few years into that journey before the video was developed, and it was to help those who were at the beginning of their journey to know when to pause and really look at the journey and their direction they were going and make sure that they were still walking in the direction that the Most High had placed them to walk in. And in beginning or preparing to share with you all about this cultivating consciousness process, that video popped into my mind, and the themes are so very similar because the basis for that video was looking at the father of what we know as faith, and it spans from pretty much over all religious sects and to different thought processes. Abraham is considered the father of the faithful, as it's termed, and his spiritual journey and his cultivation of consciousness of not only the space around him, but his call and his Elohim was a journey that many of us embark on, but we don't understand the full process of it, and then we get stagnant because we have what the world has deemed the process of spirituality, which is to attend a church and to, join social clubs and to go to youth group and to put your children in Sunday school. And then for those who move past that, then it's to go to Shabbat class, and it's to meet up, and it's to study, and it's to try to convert and move people into your form of thought and consciousness as you experience it right now. And Abraham's journey was so different. And it's often that when we embark on something, we want to trailblaze, but wisdom teaches to follow the path and the trail of one who has exceeded or arrived at the goal that you are trying to obtain in the process of doing whatever you're doing. So when it comes to Abraham, it's interesting that Abraham came from cultures and backgrounds like many people all over the world. It's a very relatable story. Abraham is born in his father's house, like mainly everyone else, and especially everyone else during that time. During that time, his father had a belief system that was contrary in a lot of ways to the belief system of Abraham's ancestors, and definitely contrary to the belief system that the Most High wanted for those who follow him. So he had a house full of pagan idols, and this is the house that Abraham grew up in. And we always think of Abraham as like a young boy who embarks on a journey towards spiritual awakening or on a spiritual journey. And Abraham was 75, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, years old when he began to awaken to his to the journey or to the call that the Most High had for him. And one of the questions, because I'm one of these people that everything is a question, and we'll get to questioning and what questions, the place that questions have in the cultivation of consciousness. And Abraham had lived 70-something years before he and the Most High converged into a space and he embraced, if you will, his call. And I was wondering to myself, that was all of that time a part of the journey and the cultivation process? Was all of that time and all of those questions and all of his upbringing a part of that journey? When I first began my spiritual journey outside of the common construct of religion being Christianity and everything that that stands for, I came into a space and into an understanding at that time, and into a group that felt that it was proper to teach me and others that I had to negate the process that allowed me to arrive into the space that I was in. And for a long time, I struggled with that thought, because the side of me that understands method and process knows that it is the journey and it is all those things in that place that move a person toward where they are. And the quote that's stuck in my head is, if I forget where I came from, am I not bound to repeat the same mistakes that I did to arrive in that space, whether it was subconscious, we'll deal with that later too, or whether it was consciously. And when thinking about Abraham, it was the process of all those roadblocks and dead ends and unknowns and searchings and questionings that put him in the perfect position to be the patriarch of the Hebrew people, later the father of the builder of the nations that we know as Israelites. And it got me thinking, if Abraham is the model, and if so many of us are journeying and we're shedding and giving up so many things and blocking off areas of our minds and the process in which the Most High, if you will, baited us along to arrive at his feet, then when things happen in life and when we enter into the dark areas of not knowing what direction to go, or when things begin to get fuzzy, what do we then rely on to return us back to where we are, or where we should be, or back to our path? We talk about the returning back to a right path, but for many of us, we're seemingly taught that we stumbled, if you will, upon the right path, or we were going one way and the Most High whispered and we arrived there. But was it not the insatiable inquisition and the need to connect and know and searching and finding that placed us right where we needed to be, so that when the Most High said, "Here I am," or "This is me," we were able to acknowledge it, look at it, and examine it with the same amount of insatiable need to know that we had that led us to that place. The same way that we searched and searched and searched to arrive at one place, should not we continue searching and searching and searching, cultivating, 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 building, 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 to get to the next phase? Because I don't know if anybody's said this in a while. I know I've used to say it probably a lot, but you're not arriving at anything. For those who have begun their spiritual journey or feel like they're advanced in their spiritual journey, there's no such thing. The Messiah teaches, which is one of the greatest, not one of the greatest teacher in any religious or spiritual context, period. If you've ever done studies on, if you've taken a humanities class, you dealt with other religions or anything, you will notice that every religious group, every religious leader, every guru, sage, imam, rabbi, who is one who is searching for more truth, will want to negate the teachings of the Messiah, but really they don't have a basis, because the truth of his words and the reality of his process is something that is built in and embedded into life in general. So when it comes to this idea of searching and asking and questioning, it has to be done, like the Messiah stated, with in a childlike manner. And childlike and childish are two completely different things. You can be both adult and childish, but to be childlike requires an amount of humility that doesn't have to necessarily always be on the forefront of the mind, because by the nature of being a child, the child has to be humble. The child is in a position of need. And so when we're approaching a spiritual journey in a childlike manner, it doesn't mean that we negate the process of thinking that we've acquired as we become adults, but it does require us to ask and to seek and to move in a way that forces us out of our "we've arrived" mentality. A child is, I'll put it like this, if you never limit a child will never know limits. Now, there are some limits that are good boundaries, but when it comes to things that a child can think about doing, for instance, if a child says, "I'm going to fly," a good parent will say, I believe you can. Now, we understand that the aerodynamics of the human body and the lack of wings and other things prevents the human from flying. But throughout history, what we have been able to see is that when a person is told what they can do or allowed to inquire toward what they believe they can do, great things happen. Flight has happened. People, hundreds of them, get onto airplanes and fly because a person was told, yes, let me see how you can make a human fly. Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant. Have you ever watched sports and basketball and the genius of defying what we never thought could happen? A person suspended in air, moving a ball from this side to this side and then dunking backwards. It took a person not taking away the inquiring mind so that greater things can be accomplished. I think those same principles apply in the spiritual journey, and I'm going to submit that the same inquiry and questioning that we have in us is permissible in our spiritual journey without having a question. And I'm not saying questioning because we don't always know all the answers, but without having a question, how will we ever arrive and get further in our spiritual journey? When we hear something and it sounds good, a lot of us just accept it because it doesn't require us to do the work to figure out if what we're hearing and what sounds good actually makes sense. We'd rather take something that sounds good, makes no sense, and apply it to our lives than to do the due diligence of seeking, finding, searching, wrestling with, in order to see if that which we have grabbed hold of is actually something that's secure and firm. In the book of Jeremiah, chapter 29, and it kind of starts at verse 11, the thought. And it goes, and I go to verse 13/14. We'll see how we get. The Most High is speaking at this time to Israel, who are captives. It's actually Jeremiah's letter to the captives, or those who have been removed from their land. And he's giving them a method to understand what is happening, what will happen, and how to move past the mistakes and the things that have happened in the past, or their actions, and to move forward and to get back into right relationship with the Most High. So Most High is speaking through the writing of Jeremiah to the captives. And in verse 11 it says, "For I know the thoughts that I think toward you, saith Yahuwah, thoughts of peace and not of evil, to give you an expected end. Then shall ye call upon me, and ye shall go and pray unto me, and I will hearken unto you." This is part where I want you guys to think about the questioning and the cultivating, and we'll get into defining that right after this. And in verse 13 it says, "And ye shall seek me and find me when ye shall search for me with all your heart." Seek me, find me when you shall search for me with your whole heart. Searching is a very, very easy way to put the word inquire. Prayer is also an inquiry. A lot of us pray, and we pray so sure, but we never pray and question, or ever think and question why we pray what we pray. And in our seeking and searching, we never do the work of seeking to figure out why we're searching in the first place. There's a term used in chapter 11, and he goes, "I know the thoughts that I think." In psychology, or in the study of how the brain works and how we think, there's a term called metacognition. And metacognition is thinking about thinking. And easier put, and to keep it in context of what we're talking about, it is to question what you're thinking and why you're thinking it. And as you're thinking it, you're thinking about your thoughts to make sure your thoughts are aligning in your intended goal. You might have to rewind that because I cannot repeat that. In the stage that we should all be in, especially as people who are searching for truth, the search for truth and the truths in things never stops. When you have arrived at your end, or at the end of your journey, that's when life ends. But until the heart stops beating, and until the soul transitions into its final resting place, then the inquiry and the search shall not stop. But many of us know that, I think, inherently. But where we're lacking is how. How do I do that? Or many of you are saying, isn't that what I'm doing? Isn't that what I'm doing when I click on a video? Or isn't that what I'm doing when I'm scrolling through YouTube trying to find something? Or isn't that what I'm doing when I'm doing a word study? Or isn't that what I'm doing when I'm, praying? Or isn't that what I'm doing when I am going about this life? And for some people, I would say, I don't know, because I don't know you. But for many of us, and I'm going to put myself in that category, we search toward the comfortable end that we perceive for ourselves, and not toward what the Most High says in chapter 11, the expected end. There is an expected end, and there is a definite end, if you will, for many of us, and that being death. Knowing that there is a end to this life means that all of our focus and energy should go toward reaching, if you will, that expected end. So then the expected end cannot be me arriving in a spiritual or in a religious group or context and thinking that once I've arrived there, there's no more. Because if you believe the words in scripture and if you understand the observational evidence and everything around us, there are so many expected ends here, and a lot of them, we may not see them all. We may not see the end of the things that happen in Revelation. We may not live past today. That is the reality. And the driving force behind searching is that we don't know our end. So if we don't know our end as far as this life is concerned, and we may not experience, like maybe the people in this letter did not live to see the end of the Babylonian captivity, right? So then what should the job be now in cultivating towards something that the Most High calls an expected end? Now, the expected end may be long or short for some of us. The expected end may be grand in the world's eyes or small. But that expected end is what each of us individually are supposed to be working toward, so that the collective then grows in not only the knowledge of who the Most High is, but in his expectation of each of us in this life and on this very, very brief journey toward his goal. Okay, so now we're going to get into, I guess, the background of consciousness. So when you think about cultivating in consciousness, cultivating for me, and I don't know how it is for you all, but it immediately makes me think of something that is very, very hands-on. And for a lot of you who maybe don't participate in the joy, this is me being biased, of gardening and growing and seeing plants go through their process, it may seem a little primitive. Why would I grow food out of the ground? Why would I get, meat from animals that I raise when I can just go to the store and I don't have to go through the process? For some of us, part of the process is the process. But it is teeming with complex modalities. Each part of the cultivating process has very, very necessary lessons that are learned through going through that process. And I think we can probably all agree on that. Anytime you do something where you're doing it with your hands, or you're required to think or think beyond something that you're comfortable with, it's going to definitely cause you to pick up new skills and learn in a different way than you probably could before. The word for that is you create new neurological pathways, which creates neuroplasticity, which allows your brain to expand and learn new things and create new connections that then make you a more functional person just overall. So, cultivate, right? So then consciousness. Consciousness is one of the most overused words right now. And it's maybe equally one of the most misunderstood words of our modern era. It's used to define being woke, but upon my further inquiry or observational evidence of those who are woke, it is a wokeness that seems to be only in part. I would define consciousness as one who is actively observing, actively recalling, and actively aware of a lot of different things. It can be on a small scale or on a large scale. But for most people, it seems as though they begin to wake and then get stuck in a dreamlike fantasy state of what it means to be conscious and woke, never really progressing toward allowing their minds to process the information they're receiving. I have nothing against, obviously I'm on YouTube, I have nothing against YouTube. I have nothing against people that use YouTube. I have nothing against people who get teaching from YouTube, because it is a way that we're allowed to experience and share different things that would have never gone out in this manner, especially now because very few people read. You can write a book and some person might pick it up, and if it's not pushed by a major publishing house, then a person may never see the valuable information that a person may be gathering and preparing to share. YouTube allows for a fast-paced environment in which people can click and be fed. Now, you determine what you're being fed, and be fed along the lines of what they want to know. So, I'm not against it. What I'm saying is, oftentimes people will eat before they read the label. I'm a big label reader when I eat, because I eat a diet that does not permit a lot of things like pork and shellfish and gelatin and a bunch of other things. I may have things on my list that you may not have on your list, and vice versa. That's fine. But when people begin to put things into their physical body, and I mean in their physical body, we don't take this, I should say your spiritual body, I'm sorry. When you begin to put things in your spiritual body, and especially into your mind, I don't think people take the same heed and warning that they do when they go through labels and read what they put into their physical body. And what you put in your physical body, as the Messiah said, you'll eat and it'll come right out, right? So you can eat something, it could be bad, and your body has a process in which it removes impurities and it removes things. And if you know that process, then it'll go through. Now, you shouldn't put trash into your body, because then your body does other things to try to counterbalance that, and that's how we get a bunch of other things. Off my soapbox. When it comes to spiritually, though, are we truly checking the label of what we're putting into our minds? And then once we put those things into our minds, how are we expelling them? If the body knows how to push things out that go into our bodies, especially when it's rejecting something, your body has a rapid method of getting things out of your body. The mind, though, has to be cultivated in a way that when something comes into the mind, or when something comes into the spirit, whether subconscious or consciously, it has to be primed and cultivated in a way to push those things out and to cause you to reflect on what that was, so that you don't pollute the body or the mind again. For many people, we're constantly stimulated into thought by outside factors. And then when you begin to think, you think that the thoughts you're thinking are your own original thoughts. I couldn't find the exact statistic, so I won't give it to you because I don't want to mislead. But I will tell you that very few of the thoughts that you have in your head, if you are not one who has cultivated your consciousness, you are not thinking original thoughts. They are thoughts that are imposed on you from probably in the womb. So they were then emotionally imposed on you by the state of your mother's, the balance of her life, her mood, her emotions were then impressed upon your mind as a child. And then as you're born, you are told what beauty is and what kindness is and what is proper and what is improper. And then as you get older, you meet friends and you pick up fragments of their world. And if you live in a technological age, like many of us do, then you are then picking up things from media, social media, thought, and all those things are going into our heads and they're stimulating thought. So as we produce thought, those thoughts are because of the primer of all of that stimuli that's coming in. And if there is no filter on the stimuli that's coming in, then the type of thoughts that are cultivated can be some far over here and some over here. So there has to be a process, and if you will, a cultivation of the mind that allows us to pull out and see what's growing and what's being planted and to monitor that space. In Proverbs 4, chapter 4, verse 23, it says, more than all that you guard your mind, for it is the source of life. Now, interestingly, that is translated, and won't be me, but we have a person who is in preparation to go over these word studies. So somebody will go into them a little more in depth. I'll dibble and dabble here and there. But we're going to open that space up to a person that I feel like really, really has the gift to do and work through with a lot of diligence, a lot of these words and things that we'll be talking about in this space. But for now, I'm going to give you the fast-paced version without the writing. The verse says, more than all that you guard. So a lot of us, we guard a lot of things, right? We guard our finances, we guard our children, we guard our home, we guard those things, those people that we love, you know. We guard our eyes by putting on eye protection. We guard things. We understand the idea of to watch over in order to preserve. Watch over in order to preserve. So if I have to watch over something in order to preserve it, it means that it's precious. It means that it can be lost. It can slip through my fingers. It is hanging in the balance, and my diligence is the thing that's keeping it whole. Okay? So it says, more than all that you guard your mind. In most of your translations, it says heart. You go back to some older videos, I do a thing on heart. So the heart, just briefly, in the Hebrew language, is not your heart, the thing that pumps in your chest. But your heart is the authority within. It is your mind. Now the heart also acts as an authority, right? Because it pretty much regulates and controls everything. You can live without a lung, you can live without a few things in your body, but you can't live without a heart. The heart is the beating thing that pumps blood to everything. So it does sit in a control center. But in this case, it's talking about your mind, your authority within. It's the thing that is holding on to the reins of your sanity. And it is regulating and balancing everything. So just like you can't live without a brain, can't live without a heart. The brain sends signals to the body. It tells you what to do, how to move. It allows us to interact. It works with our speech and the ability to communicate and to express and to feel. When this goes, then everything else goes. And you can have everything perfect everywhere else, but if the brain goes off balance, then there's no space of recovery. What does anything else matter? What does it matter if I have a voice or a mouth to speak if the words that come out are not edifying, or if they're mixed together? One of my greatest fears for a long time, for anyone, what is for that to happen. And so I think that is the driving force for me beginning right here in this space, because if the Most High tells us to focus on something and to guard something, it's not because it's light work, right? It's because that thing, if it goes the other way, is a very, very hard thing to recover and get back into a right space. So the best thing to do would be to guard it and not allow it to get into that space. Because, I mean, we don't have many stories of people who have come back from those kind of spaces, because we are not taught how to cultivate our consciousness, and we're taught to forget, and we're taught to not keep tab of the journey that caused us to arrive at certain ends, as I mentioned in the beginning. So if I don't know how I arrive somewhere, then I don't know how to get back to it. Okay, so more than anything that you guard your mind, for out of it are the issues of life. The verse says, more than anything that might be guarded, guard your mind. Your mind, and I know this is something, and I'm telling you, over the next however long the Most High sees fit for me to stay in this space, I'm very passionate about it right now. And as we journey, you will understand that the mind and how you think and what you put in your mind creates a map of what life is going to look like. And I know you guys have heard that, like, as a man thinketh, so is he. It is the single most powerful thing that we have been entrusted with by the Most High, your mind. And what he's saying is, this is powerful. And it's also fragile. And because the mind is powerful and also fragile, you have to guard it. You have to understand it. You have to trust me, the maker of all things, that when I say that something is important and that it's fragile, that it is. And when I say that not everything should be allowed space there, I'm serious. And when I tell you that you should try anything and anyone that tries to plant there, I'm not kidding. Because so many things are happening, and if you're not conscious of it, you will allow things to happen in that space that you will not be able to control. I was looking at this verse earlier, and it says, and the issues of life, because out of it or from it flow the issues of life, or come the issues of life. And I looked up the word, and the word issues was the word for, it was literally defined as excrement. And I mentioned earlier that when you put stuff into your mouth and it passes through a digestive process, and then you release those things and you can flush it and it's gone, right? And if you flush well enough, then you can really restart your system. The same is true of the mind. It doesn't mean that nothing will ever come into your mind. It doesn't mean that the things of the world won't affect your mind, but what it does mean is you have to understand that mind well enough to know how to flush that thing out. You have to understand that mind well enough to not put things that are difficult to flush out. You have to understand your mind well enough to know that what you put here then projects the world. Briefly, let's just go into this weird space. Everything that you see and everything that you experience is something that you have seen or already experienced. That's how you know what it is. So can you imagine stepping into a space, and many of us do it, maybe subconsciously, where you see something you've never seen before, whether it's an animal, whether it's a picture, whether it's a drawing, whether it's a device that's used to do something, and you go, what is that? And your brain immediately, once you inquire, then you're going to research, you ask a person, what is that? And they'll go, oh, that is a candle. What is a candle for? Well, a candle, well, you light the top and then it puts off light. And you just acquired a new neurological pathway and a new thing in your mind. You understand how something works, something new, how it works. The mind operates the same exact way. We're constantly being stimulated and given definitions for things and how they are working in our world. But until we experience something, we don't know what it is. When a baby arrives on the scene, they are very, very curious. And they're looking at everything and they point and they go, what's that? And you go, that's a cup. And what's that? And that's this. And your world is being defined. And so if the world is being defined and the brain is taking in this information so that you can experience the world as it is, then the world that you're experiencing is very much limited to what you've seen and experienced. So there's so many other things out there that we don't know yet, that we haven't seen yet, that we haven't experienced. But once we see them and we experience them, they become a part of our knowledge base. They become our map and our blueprint for how we live out the world. So if our thoughts are negative and we are not cultivating and weeding out our minds, and we're putting things in, and we're believing things, and we're creating this world, then we can create a world that is very, very, very dark, and very, very cryptic, and very, very warped. And by doing so, we then begin to live out these self-fulfilling prophecies about the world. I'll tell you one. I won't use any, I won't say any person, group, religion, or anything. But in certain religious groups, there is this designation that all people of a specific race are one way, and that all people of another race are another way. And if I tell myself that, how I go out into the world, how I go out into the world and how I perceive the world and how I act on the world is going to give me back those results, thus confirming my premise. I can make my thoughts true based upon how I interact with the world around me. Now, I can choose to do different too. If I choose to cultivate a lifestyle around people who love and care about me, and I don't really deal with this and these people, then I can create a world that is pleasant and that is productive and that can glorify as well. So that was just an example to show you that how you perceive something and how you go out and what you put out is what you get back in return. Okay? The subconscious mind is the mind that is not currently in focal view. So think about it. All of us have sight. We can see if you're sitting at home and you're looking forward, right? There are things you can see on your peripheral to your right and your left, but they're not necessarily in focus. So if I was sitting focusing straight, looking straight here, and let's say something happened right out here. There's goats on this side. I'll use them. And I see a goat run, and I see it come, and it goes past this window and this way. I kind of vaguely understand what happened. The goat was in the pen, and it got out. The process in which that happened is very, very fuzzy to me because it wasn't in my focal view. But if I was to turn and look out the window and see those same exact things happen, then I would be able to give a detailed report of what happened, thus allowing me to better fix the issue of how that happened. Otherwise, I'd have to do like I've done on plenty of occasions and find a goat somewhere in the garden and then go, okay, let me walk around the goat area and see where this happened. It's a process, but it's not one that's in your focal view. Many of us live a life where our mind and our how we cultivate our spiritual journey and how we deal with things is in a more peripheral way. We focus on one thing, but then there's all these other things happening on the side that we never give our attention to. And as a person that has animals and gardens, I've come to understand that if I can't focus, somebody and something has to be focusing. But it's better for me if my focal point is on the things that are important to me, because then I can give account for them. When we're talking about our mind, the main thing that will be called into judgment when we transition from this life is what we did with our minds and our time, because our mind tells us what to do, and that's why we do the things we do. And our time is how we spend and live out the things that we decide to do. And it would behoove us to bring that which is important into our focal view and to keep the things that are unimportant out. We guard that which is in our focal view, that which is mainly important, and that other stuff is just, it's unimportant. Underneath the layers of critical thought function of the conscious mind lay a powerful awareness that a psychologist by the name of Pierre Janet called the subconscious mind. Subconscious mind is the thing that drives everything. It's the thing that happens underneath. So in gardening, it would be like the roots that are being established before you ever see the plant pop up. Know this, that in your subconscious mind, there are things that are being established by how we enact, by how we interact, by how we study, by who we listen to, by who we trust, and by the values and importance we place on things, and their roots going down, and they're gathering and they're snatching nutrients from other places of our life, from other areas of our lives, in order to produce a fruit. It can be positive or negative. Another psychologist called it an alternate storage of one's knowledge and prior experience. So as much as we want to think that we can get rid of that which was before, we can't. We can, but we probably haven't, is what I should say. And it takes us actually cultivating, which leads me to actually our word now. So what does it mean to cultivate? Cultivating means to bestow attention and care, to labor upon with a view to valuable returns. It means to fertilize and cultivate. It's a process. And if anybody knows anything, I'll give you this kicker. It is a cyclical process. Cultivation is not a singular process. You can't say, hey, I've cultivated, I've arrived in this spiritual journey, and I'm right here in this place, and I'm good, putting on fruit. If you don't know anything about plants, if you let a plant go year after year, the quality begins to diminish. The quantity begins to diminish. Plants can get sick. Nothing in life is on autopilot, especially not your spiritual journey, and especially not the cultivation of your mind and your heart as it pertains to being the person working toward the expected end that the Most High has set forth for us. Cultivate is also defined as direct attention to, devotion to thought, devotion to time, and to thought in order to flourish. It also means to court intimately. I don't know if you've ever grown anything, but it is absolutely the most intimate process ever. To take something from seed, and depending on how you do it, the transplant process is always, to me, probably the more intimate one, because it takes, you're really on edge throughout the process, because when you move plants, they go into shock. You expose their roots. Roots are supposed to be under the ground, hidden where they can get nutrients and conceal, and you're handling almost the veins of the plant. It's almost like a surgeon, where you plant this little plant and you're going out there and you're watching and you're making sure it's sprouted, and you're like, not too much sun, not enough sun, not too much water, not enough water, not enough air. And it's this little incubation process, and it's very, very intimate. And so when you're out here and you're gardening, you think that you have a garden full of plants, but anybody who has ever gardened knows that each plant is unique and precious all in itself. You can have a plant, all 20 of them could be doing fine, and this one plant's getting yellow leaves, and you're over there like, well, why are you getting yellow leaves? And what's wrong with you? And you start talking to plants. I don't know if any of you who plant talk to your plants. It's a total thing. It's a very intimate courting. It's I need something from you, so I have to give something to you. The same is the way with the brain. And as you're cultivating consciousness, it's a very intimate process. We handle ourselves with fragility because we are not rough. And especially us women, we have a lot that go on in our minds. And we handle it with the delicacy of the most precious thing you've ever held in your hands. If you've held a baby, then you understand that. I am, and anybody who knows me knows this is true, I am so clumsy. I'm surprised that this tea that I have sitting here is not on the floor already. And one of the things that used to scare me when the babies were small was I'm going to be holding them, walking somewhere in the house, and I'm going to drop them or I'm going to fall. And it was something that was in my subconscious mind. And believe me, it's so interesting. I never fell with my children. And that is, to me, 2 children, and I mean, they're 8 and 6 now, I don't really care very much, but it's insane. But there is a delicacy that you handle something that is very important. So when we're talking about cultivating, it's to court with an intimacy, to give and to pour into. It means to improve by labor, care, study, to impart culture to civilize and to refine. So in the process of cultivating, right? And now we're talking in a more personal sense and not so much of an outdoors sense. It is a labor to improve oneself, to care about oneself, to study, to impart culture to civilize and to refine. It extends from oneself and extends to those who have been put into a person's care in order to cultivate them. By profession, I'm an educator, and I know some of you know that, others of you don't. And in my studies through undergrad and through master's program, I have understood with more passion and with a better grasp the cultivation process of the young mind and even the adult mind in some settings. And it is not only a privilege, but it's an honor. And a lot of people who go into educating, whether it's YouTube educators or teachers or mores or rabbis or imams or, gurus, in order to be considered a good or great educator, it takes the heart to be involved in the process. There is no cultivation without heart. And I don't say, I guess I should modify that statement and say, you can cultivate without heart. But what you will cultivate is robots. What you will cultivate is monoculture. What you will cultivate is something so dangerous that when it comes to its head, we will understand the gravity of such a sterile decision. And I can use that in both settings. In the garden setting or in agriculture, monoculture is the process in which plants are cultivated in a singular way. So you see cornfields, endless cornfields. And you'll also have the space where you will see this endless amount of one crop, and it actually depletes the soil. It creates disease, and it ups the chance of outbreaks, because there's no possible way that people can look over monoculture in that way, especially large crops, and that's how things like that happen. Where when you talk about more small crop cycling farms, more fresh farm-to-table areas, you're going to get a crop that is being looked over, that's being cultivated, nutrients are being added back to the soil in a natural way. We're not needing GMOs and close pollination and pesticides in order to control what happens in monoculture, but it can be controlled in a smaller environment. So the same thing is true in cultivating of minds. We all, in our minds, love large things. We like large gatherings and large fellowships and large social gatherings and concerts. But it's a lot harder to control what's happening in those settings. But when we get into intimate settings, especially those in the classroom or those where a person is a teacher or a cultivator, then it gives the ability to labor, to care, to study, to impart culture, and to civilize and to refine in a way that is not only measurable, but also quantifiable over time. Okay. So it needs to raise and produce by tillage and to care for. In Genesis 2:15, Adam, first man Adam, and is given the job to dress and keep the garden, right? In Genesis 3:23, you're going to see the same exact thing. He makes a mistake. He disobeys Yah. And I guess I couldn't call it a mistake because it was a blatant disobedience. And he is given the task of still doing the same job that he was originally told to do, which was to dress and keep the garden. Now, in our minds, we think that when a person does something and they fail at it, that they don't get to try it and do it again. And the Most High's mind, he's like, I gave you that thing because that's what you're supposed to do, and you're going to continue to do that thing until that thing is complete. And that means that you'll have to modify you, and you'll have to work on you, and you'll have to cultivate you as you cultivate and do the job and the task that I told you to do. Genesis 4:12 tells us and teaches us that adversity and failure does not disqualify us from our duty to cultivate. It is our job not only to cultivate ourselves, no matter how much we fail, no matter how much we crop fail as humans, we have to come back to the drawing board and cultivate toward that end. Most people think that when something goes wrong, then you give up on that and you try something else. Well, if you don't know what your call is, and I think that may be a thing. Try until you get it right. But for those of us who have been called and have a job and have something to do, it is our due diligence and life duty to continue to cultivate and grow and work at a thing, because failure does not disqualify you from your duty to cultivate. All of us, no matter who you are, you have a duty because of this, to constantly come back to the drawing board and grow and cultivate and weed and till the soil and let it rest and come back to it and plant new seeds and grow and rest and offer them to the Father and let him examine them and tell you, okay, that was good, but try this. And continue to refine and redefine the mind so that it appears in similitude to that of Messiah. This mind, which is also in HaMashiach. Okay? Deuteronomy 28:39 teaches that even when we are, slow down. Deuteronomy 28:39 teaches that even when we are disobedient, we are not taken away from the job of cultivation. We won't get the benefit of the labor, but it's still imperative. So think about all the curses. You're going to grow a field, but you won't get to eat it. You're going to, sow, but you won't gather. You're going to store things, and they're going to. Why? Because cultivation is essential to life. If physical cultivation of the ground is essential to life, then the cultivation of the mind is essential to the well-being of the human body and to the well-being of the collective of the community. You don't get to stop doing that. You will be removed from that space, but you will not be given the opportunity to stop. The prophet, teacher, preacher is a gardener of minds and hearts. If the person that is teaching you and leading you is not gardening, cultivating your mind and your heart in accordance with the expected end of the Father, drop it. It is sad that we live in a space and time where, coupled with the revelation of the existence still of the people of the Bible, that the vast majority of the teachers and preachers and prophets and whomever are so focused on that which is fleeting that they've negated the things that are most important. And one of the curses that exists in Deuteronomy 28 as an identifier of our people is the state of mind. Our minds are the battleground. I was doing this and I was thinking about this idea of land, and the focal point is, these people are in this land and we need this land back. I've heard it in your groups and your thought processes and the people who teach and the stuff that's regurgitated and shared with those of us around who are listening. And one of the interesting things that I guess a lot of people don't do is probably read and know what the expected overall end is. And there's this constant fight for identity and being identified and people knowing that this is this and these things are this, which I do not negate is important. The book teaches that when the time comes, Yah, the I am, will let everyone know, these are my people, this is whom I have loved. If he has taken on the responsibility to do the identifying, and that's not necessarily my job. My job is to know who I am and to help those who know who they are and cultivate. But when it comes to global identification of a particular people group, the Most High has reserved that for himself. So because that's not my job, then my question is, what is my job? What is my job? If the battle is not for the land, because the Most High reserved that battle for himself. That's also in the book. Then what is my job? If there's going to be a new heaven and a new earth, according to this book, and that's being prepared, and the former one shall pass away and make room for that new one that shall come down out of the sky, then what is my job? Is my job worrying about a specific place? Is my job worrying about what other people think about what I'm supposed to be doing as I cultivate toward this expected end? But better yet, the battle in this time is for mind space. With all the simulation and the things going around, the battle is for the mind. And the battle is for mental territory. We don't have a land to take. We don't have an identity to take anymore. So then, if there's anything that the adversary is chest moving for, it's for this. And if we negate and fail to cultivate this according to the truths and through exploration and questioning and seeking, then we leave room and we don't guard. Where it says, guard that more than anything you guard, because it's the only thing that you really have. It's the only place that you are really serving Yah from. It's the only temple that's still intact. It's the only land that still can bear fruit. It's the only place that nobody can have unless you lower the gates and allow them to come in. Consciousness is an awareness of one's thoughts, environment, and existence. This is based on Webster's dictionary. It is possessing knowledge, whether by internal conscious experience or by external observation, to be cognizant, aware, and sensible. Knowing or being known to oneself, and also understanding what conscious guilt is. Knowing through acquaintance. In the conscious movement, you've heard this term. It's echoed in a different way in Scripture. It says, "Know thyself." If I don't know me, and if I don't understand my mind, and I don't understand what's expected of me, then how can I know the Father? How can I know my Creator? And how can I connect with my Creator? I have to cultivate a process and cultivate a consciousness that is consistent with what His standard is for me in my life. It means to continue the expansion of the mind. Expanding the mind doesn't mean thinking outside of Yah. It's impossible to think outside of the Creator. It's impossible to think outside of the Most High, because the Most High is, if you will, the universal consciousness. He's what keeps everything together. So being afraid of thinking outside of Him while you're in Him or in His way, it's not possible. But when you allow yourself and you don't cultivate the things that come in here, and when you have this thought in here and His truth in here and they mingle together, it's dangerous. You get cross-pollination and some weird stuff. You get cucumbers that taste like jalapenos. I've done it. It's not good. You have to know what's being planted and where it's being planted, and you have to cultivate that space in order to allow for a proper fruit and a proper produce to come forth that's pleasing to the sight of the Most High. You need to know, acknowledge, respect, and discern. It means to experience through sight and learn by what you see, but with a childlike perception, a perception that requires you to inquire of the one who created that which you see, in order to get a better understanding of how to go about navigating through those things. So we talked about navigating through captivity, and navigating through identity, and navigating through cultivation. It comes with knowing what the Creator already said He was going to do, and how I'm supposed to then humble myself to His work, but also cultivate in the way that He's told me to cultivate. Consciousness, finally, is a looking glass or a mirror. It's to perceive something or someone. The first person you need to be perceiving is self. That's your first duty of perception. You need to know you. You need to know you for who you are, not who you think you are, who we think we ought to be. Not that we think more highly of ourselves than we ought to be. And then coupled with that, we need to see ourselves how the Most High sees us. Good, bad, and different. And that allows a level playing field and a tilled space to begin our cultivation process. So, as we journey, and as we pick up back here in Royal Roots land, we're going to deal with a lot of cultivation. It's one thing to know what we're supposed to do, but it's a completely different thing to do what we're supposed to do. It's one thing to look like we're supposed to look. It's a whole completely different thing to know how to act and how to live and how to navigate through the times that we live in. We have been given rules and instructions and a process, and it's so much more tangible. So, as we're cultivating consciousness, as we're working on our minds, and as we're aligning our thoughts and our everyday living and our interactions to that which is pleasing to the Most High, I guarantee, and I can guarantee this because it's a guaranteeable thing, that if we walk circumspect to the ways of the Most High, and if we begin to understand our place and our position and our end game, our expected end, then we will begin to see much more than dissension and fracturing and breaking and the repetitive, nonsensical things that are sown into the soil of the community. But we can't fix the soil, and we can't fix an issue by fixing the collective, because in monoculture it's too big. It has to start in an individual manner with very, very simple lived out instructions that make sense, that are studied, that are guarded, that are put into practice, that we don't judge until they bear fruit, so that we know when it's time to move on and to gather and to harvest and to present. It is the job of planning, guarding, being malleable, repeating, and refining. I'm so excited that we are back in this space. I'm so excited for what the future brings. I'm so excited for our new additions of people to our group and who will be doing work here in this space. And I appreciate each and every person that sent an email, that checked on me, that has been here watching videos, studying, growing in the cultivation and process of arriving back at this space. I want to let you know, just in all honesty and transparency, it was not an easy process. Even today, turning on this camera, it was like, okay, we're doing this. No, we're not. Let's wait. And putting it off, but waiting for the right time so that what has been poured into me and what has been cultivated into me, I can then pour out and give back to those of you who are here, ready to learn, and are truly seeking to serve the Most High in spirit and truth and growth and transparency, and going through the process, and with everything in me, with all of the love of Most High, I literally project all of that to you, each and every one of you who are on this process, who are looking. I'm telling you from my end, we are on the path to getting to know things, but we don't know it all. And humility and walking and growing together is so important. So for those of you that stuck around, I'm so glad you're here. I am your cultivator. I am your buddy, friend, the person who will stick on this journey and see what the expected end is. And I'm glad that for those of you who have stuck around, that we are on this journey and we're going through this process together to glorify the Father in all we do. So thank you, and until next time.